everybody. This is Deborah Cat from Deborah Cat Coaching, and you are listening to the Better Sex Podcast, where we have unfiltered conversations about sex and relationships that we hope inspire you to more love and better sex worldwide. If you want to help to do your part in spreading sex and love around the world, please like, subscribe, and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts. It really does make a difference. Today, we're talking Tantra, and I have the radiant Lindy James, who I've had the pleasure of knowing since the beginning of my Tantra journey. So the official bio says that Lindy James is a counselor, intimacy coach, sexual healer. She's a certified tantric educator, a Hakomi graduate, and 25-year Tantra practitioner. Lindy offers sessions in the art of conscious intimacy for individuals, couples, and groups. She is a woman gracefully in touch with her intuitive wisdom. She believes in the importance of healing ourselves by facing the truth, developing clear communication, and nurturing deep self-love. So that's the official bio. And I have to tell you, it is only a fraction of how awesome Lindy is. As I said, I've known her since the beginning of my tantric journey, and she is one of the most radiant, generous women that I have encountered in this path. And it is so exciting to have you here as my guest today. So I'd love to hear your story, Lindy. How did you get here?
Well, first I want to say thank you, Deborah. It's always been a pleasure to meet you, see you, dance with you, and our tantric journey together off and on through the different courses that we have taken. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Thank you.
So I got here by hook or by crook. I was about 34, so that's how many, 30 plus years ago. And I went to a Tantra training with a group of my friends in my community. And I was terrified. I thought it was going to be one big orgy or something like that. And I really learned that Tantra is a way to heal our sexuality, to open our heart and open our bodies. And through these different practices, I really felt I went from my yoni or my sexual center, from being numb to being quite alive. So it really can help us. After those first 2 weekends, an intermediate and a beginner weekend with all my community, we met once a month to practice pujas. We all took turns leading pujas, and I got really comfortable being in a leading position. And it took another 10 years till I jumped in and started supporting my teachers' trainings and being an assistant and watching people. And every time I would do that, I would hear another nuance, like what is it that the chakras do? And how do we create a safe container? And definitely the techniques for connecting our bodies with our sexuality, but also connecting with our partners. And one of the beautiful pieces is when either a new relationship that, feel that lovely spark, it lasts 6 months, maybe 2 years if you're lucky. And then that spark starts to go, and how Tantra can, help us create love, help us to remain in love, even after children, to have simple 10-minute connects that help us keep our body open, tuning with ourselves and attuning with our partners.
I love that. So there's a couple words that you use that I would just love to invite you to expand on in case our listeners aren't clear what they are. And one of them was container, and the other was chakra. And if you could speak a little bit to that, that'd be great.
And there's one more. The Sanskrit word for vagina is yoni. So when I say yoni, and yoni translates as sacred space or holy temple. And that really changed my relationship to my own yoni. And for men, it's lingam, and it translates as wand of light. And that also changed my relationship to a man's sexual center, and to think about how we can move from our heart through our genitals and offering love in that way, also through our eyes and through our touch and through our words. But those are two words, yoni and lingam. Sometimes we say vajra, but they're two words that I use now. It sounds just a little more beautiful than vagina. Not that vagina is a bad word, or any of the other sweet names we give ourselves, but to bring it into the sacred.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I really want to highlight this idea of changing your relationship to your genitals and changing the relationship to your partner's genitals. As, many of us grow up in this culture, we don't, the most of the words for our genitals are negative. And so I using yoni, using vajra, using lingam, sometimes it can feel a little bit like presumptuous, but at the same time, when you live into that, it's just, I love what you were saying about the idea of the wand of light, or the sacred cave, or the sacred space. And because I know for me that's definitely been a journey from down there
Right.
to like this amazing space of where I can, really give and receive amazing pleasure.
And my fear of the penis, when the things that I believed I was in charge of, had to. And a big part for me of Tantra and healing is to learn what are our beliefs that we grew up with. What are the conditionings or the habitual patterns? And one, was like, if he has an erection, I have to do something. What a bummer. It's like, why not just think there's a wand of light in the room and it's beautiful and I don't have to do anything with it, but maybe just enjoy. And so it's not as scary because, men, their erections are on the outside, so they really can't hide them very well. Like we can be turned on and it's kind of secret unless we share it. And so, using those words has really helped me to, like I spoke of before, the container. And the container for me personally is bringing in the sacred. So I have beautiful statues of deities in my house. I always have flowers. I have flowers in my garden, but in any kind of given session, either with a client or with a lover, I like to do some prayer, some calling in, evoking. I like to speak fears, desires, and boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And so, my boundary might be, I have an hour, or my clothes aren't coming off, or I want to be juicy, but not have intercourse. So once you speak your boundaries, then a part of you can really relax. And it's important, even if your boundary was, we're not going to have intercourse, and you have the feeling of wanting to, that you pause and take slow breaths and then talk about it rather than automatically go into it. Because I think it hurts us to go past our boundaries in the long run.
Yeah. Well, and I love, for me personally, I love that feeling of turn on. And even sometimes wanting to push up against going further,
Yes. That can be even more of a turn on, huh?
Well, yeah. And then when my partner is like, nope, that's not what we discussed, I'm like, oh, that's so hot. I know that sounds a little bit strange, but I really do love it when, when I don't have to hold that boundary. Like I think that's a really important thing for people to have the experience of, is especially women, is really getting to surrender.
Yes.
And part of what, at least for me, and I find this with, often with my clients, is it's like we have that concern. You mentioned earlier this idea that like, oh my goodness, there's a hard on in the room. I have to do something about it. But allowing his turn on and allowing him to feel his turn on, without the expectation of it going any further. And then on my side, allowing me to have my turn on and just really revel in it without the concern that it may need to go further, or that somehow by just enjoying my turn on, I'm some sort of tease or something, can be, can take me out. So yeah, really bringing in that discussion of fears and desires and boundaries, and creating and using those to create the container of what's going to happen.
Exactly. And it could be, I just want to do a 20-minute connect and then get up and make dinner, because we come home from a long day of work and we don't feel like it. Or we've been taking care of the children all day, or we had a fight with our boss. It doesn't matter if we just let ourselves pause and connect and even feel pleasure and just breathe in it. If you can imagine, if you could feel pleasure in your yoni or your lingam, and then just take breaths and let it feed the rest of your body, dinner's going to taste even better.
Yes, it is.
So, to speak desires, my desire is to just run a little energy with you. That means that I feel the energy of my sexuality sparking off yours, but we're just going to do it a little bit. Mm-hmm. And or whatever your desire is. My desire is just to give to you for 10 minutes. My desire is, I just want you to squeeze my shoulders for 5 minutes. It's like, it's open. It doesn't have to be sexual always.
Right. And I think what you're describing is really living that tantric life.
Yes.
Full of, pleasure and turn on and connection and awareness. And I love that you said, that you mentioned that, like, bringing that turn on to cooking dinner, and being able to bring that everywhere you go.
Yes. And I notice, I work with a lot of couples where, oftentimes the woman doesn't want to have sex anymore. And what I find is there isn't that interlude there. If sometimes I even give the practice of, you have to ask her before you touch. Mm-hmm. May I nibble your ear? May I nibble your neck? And instead of just walking up and putting my hands on your breasts, our bodies start to shut down when that happens. My husband one time said to me, this was when I was very young, honey, I'm a man and I have my needs. And I started wearing turtlenecks, because I was just, the idea of being naked was an invitation to him. And so I see that happens a lot with couples, like how to build that spark slowly. It's not like we're only going to connect if we're going to have sex and we need, 2 hours. What if we had 5-minute, 10-minute, 20-minute connects and we don't have sex, but we juice each other up? And Tantra gives us lots of beautiful practices that help us live that, like you said, tantric life. But we need to be in agreement. We need to be able to put that effort in. And that takes some amount of commitment if you want to really choose that aliveness where you're mostly alive a lot of the time.
Love that. So I know before we hopped on, we were talking about some of the myths around Tantra. And I'd love to invite, the conversation about what is Tantra and what are some of the myths about it. And I'm curious what maybe some of the surprises you found about it.
Well, a lot of times when I advertise, I use the word Tantra because people hear it and they think, oh, I want to do Tantra. More often I'll say sacred sexuality because Tantra connotates many things to people, like the Kama Sutra and the 101 positions for intercourse. And so the 3 myths that I wrote down, it's all about being hot and sexy and orgies, or you have to be young and beautiful and hot, or you have to have a partner to practice. And really living Tantra daily is about tuning your own body. Could be breath practices, could be a few moments of self-pleasure. I like to just cup my yoni and my heart and do 3 slow breaths. And it helps my brain. The neural pathways in the brain that go down into your body, if you've had any sexual misconduct, abuse, anything at all that causes your body to shut down, those neural pathways get shut down. So by cupping my own yoni and touching my heart, it helps my brain travel down and connect with myself. And later, we do some practices like laying together and spooning and breathing through the chakras. It helps my brain trickle down into my body and connect with yours. Whether it's a friend or a partner, we can practice with people. We call it Tantra buddies that maybe we're not sexual with. And it can be a man or a woman that we learn to feel our own sexual energies in that container where we say what our boundaries are. Like, I'm not going to get naked with you, but I can spoon with you. Or if I feel shy about spooning, sometimes my clients, we put a little blanket between us so that we can find that place that feels really safe.
I love the way that you're talking about making the adjustment.
Yeah.
And really just creating an experience that, like, even the idea of, oh, you can do that. You can have a blanket between the 2 of you. And it doesn't, it creates the safety, but it doesn't change the energetic, at least from what I would imagine.
Right. So you say the word energetic, and I was saying chakras. Different belief systems have different numbers of chakras. Like, I think the Taoists have 3. I know for myself, I have 6 or 7. How many is the crown chakra? But each chakra or energy center. So there's the base chakra, which is like around the anus and the sits bones, what we sit on, that's like our food and shelter and safety, kind of primal energies. If we're not feeling safe, oftentimes we have a pretty tight butt. And so we need to find ways to feel safety. That's part of the container. And the second energy center or chakra is the genitals. In my book, some people have them in the first chakra, but it doesn't matter what number, it's just feeling the energies in your body. And the the solar plexus is the third chakra, which is your power center. How many of us give away our power? And it gets trained into us at a very young age. And then we go up to the heart center. The heart center we're more familiar with. It's like, I know when my heart hurts. And I know when my heart is open. And I know what love feels like. I'm easier to give love than receive love. We get to know ourselves. The throat is the place of expression, of finding your voice, which is a key subject. Then the brow is the third eye, to be able to be insightful, to see the truth of things. And the crown is often depicted as the ability to connect with the divine, with spirit, or you could even say higher power. So in my work, I really teach people to feel the pieces, each one of these energy centers, and eventually you can feel how open they are. So like I said about the neural pathways, it's funny, as I'm talking, I'm making all these gestures with my hands. But the neural pathways going down into the body, we learn to make connection with that. And so then when I'm spooning with somebody, my heart against the front of my heart against the back of their heart. And we breathe in and out through the heart. And it's just a visualization and a breath. And eventually I can feel when your heart opens and my heart feels a tingling or a bubbliness or an ache that lets me know. So I also studied Hakomi, as you mentioned, and it's a form of psychotherapy that's more body-centered. So when you feel afraid or when you feel joy or when you feel emotional of any kind, where in your body do you feel it and what does it feel like? And that feeling, like, the body speaks in metaphor. So it may not make sense. When I'm really happy, my heart feels like champagne. So I just accept that. When my yoni feels happy, feels like I don't know, like if I tune in right now, it might be a little quiet. I'm sitting on a chair. But when she's happy, I might feel this sudden like just it feels like a relaxation. I go, oh, and then it's like each one of these energy centers or chakras, they speak, but we learn the language of how they speak. So when my yoni is feeling safe, I will feel a sense of relaxation, a sense of opening. I might feel a tingling. And then I just pay attention, like, oh, okay, there's a yes happening for whatever. Maybe it has to do with eating strawberries and whipped cream. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say the idea of being able to feel your yes and feel your no.
Yes, correct.
And so I'm curious, because this is something that I really, I work with my clients around, is this idea of what is the somatic feeling in your body when you are a yes to something. And so what I hear you say is there's some tingling and there's a relaxation, and that's how you know your yes. And I'm curious, like, how do you know your no?
Well, you get to know your own body. So you might not feel tingling. You might feel, might feel like bubbles instead of champagne. Although champagne is bubbles, soap bubbles, whatever it is. So here's the thing. We are really trained, most of us. I'm calling myself a recovering pleaser or good girl. We are trained to say yes and please the other. So to be able to pause, would you like to have dinner with me? Well, let me just tune in for a second. And I let myself have that breath to go in, maybe to my heart or to my gut, and say, does it feel right to go out to dinner? Does it feel right to go on this date? So you come down in, and then you take a moment to come back out and voice what is true. And even when what is true is a no, to say, when I feel into it, I get a no, but thank you so much for offering. Because we're taught to just say what the other wants to hear, especially in relationship. And we get in situations where we're really not a full yes. So if it's a no, it might feel like a tension in my gut, or it might feel like numb in my heart, like I don't feel anything. The more we practice looking, the more we have this natural dialogue with ourselves. And being able to say no lovingly, sometimes we have to learn. We're not going to be perfect from the first try, usually.
Yeah, I was impressed. I was going to mention that you give such good no. It's like, as you were describing your no, it's like, oh, okay. It felt good to hear your no there. And it's funny, as I think about it, like for me, one of the things that reminds me or that signals to me that I'm a no is I have a tendency to, like, my jaw gets tight.
Ah, yes, that's a good one.
So I'm like, oh, that's a no. Mm-hmm. And then, again, the yes is generally, I don't know whether, what do I want to say here? The other thing for me is temperature. Like, I'll notice if I'm a yes to something, there's generally heat.
Yeah, that's a good one too. Yeah. Right.
So cool.
And learning to disappoint, I say that willingness to disappoint, we have to learn to ground ourselves and feel our own fear. And, a friend, one of my best friends she stayed here in my home while she was recovering from an illness. And then she wanted to continue living with me. And we just weren't a good match. And for me to say no to her was terrifying. But it was more terrifying to live uncomfortable for, years to come. Mm-hmm. And so I said, I really rather live alone right now. I really don't want to have a roommate. And that was honest. Mm-hmm. If you say, I don't want to do that right now, that leaves it open for another time. And she was really hurt. And I was like devastated, and she said, well, I don't like you anymore, but I still love you. Because she could say, that's the feeling she had. She was mad at me. She didn't say, I don't like you. She said, I'm mad at you, but I still love you. Mm-hmm. And she had to deal with her own disappointment. And that's mature. We need to be mature when someone disappoints me.
Right.
I can even say, oh, that's really disappointing. But I understand, and thank you for your honesty, because when you're honest, I'm going to trust you more.
Right. And when we're, when we can be more, when we can really be honest with ourselves to the best of our abilities,
right.
Then we have more trust with ourselves. And then we can, at least it's been my experience, and I see this a lot with my clients. It's like, part of the hesitancy to, to say the no and to disappoint someone can often be like not being sure what the consequences are.
Yes.
And, having had awkward experiences. It's funny. It's like the key to everything these days seems to be like, how comfortable with discomfort can one be?
Exactly. I totally agree. And sometimes it's edgy. Like I'm really good at talking to a group in my house or to you on the computer, but a new group out at a conference, I'm terrified, but less and less. And I'm willing to be uncomfortable to do it rather than letting that discomfort go away, make me say no. Mm-hmm. So we learn that difference. It's edgy for me. That's different than a no. And so, that's a fine difference. But yes, I said yes, because I want to be out in the world more teaching and in a situation where the container isn't controlled by me. That's edgy. And we want to, that's the place where I learn the most. But if we go over the edge, like doing something that causes us to disassociate, that's harmful. So being able to recognize, whoa, this is a little scary, as opposed to where am I? I'm not home anymore. And that really applies to lovers and sexuality. And so in this living a tantric life, it's that honesty and that being able to read yourself. And even when your partner or friend or potential date, to be able to be honest with those in our lives, it starts to lower the fear in my body, the anxiety, or like the tight jaw, or I'm cold all of a sudden. It really helps us practice.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate the distinction between this is edgy and I'm uncomfortable, and this is actually a no. Wow. And really getting to play with those two things. Because I think, there's that meme where it's like, there's the circle and it says comfort zone. And then there's like this up to the right-hand side, there's like this circle that says all the cool stuff. And all the cool stuff is outside of the comfort zone. But there's pacing. There's leaning in, and then there's falling over the edge.
Exactly. That's what I said. We don't want to go over the edge, but we can be in that little scary place.
Yeah. And you mentioned in particular about doing events. And so that kind of got me curious, like, what are you up to these days?
Well, I will say that because of this whole COVID thing, I have learned how to use Zoom and I never would have. So I have been doing an introductory course through Eventbrite now. But if you want to be on my contact list, you can contact me, Lindy at lindyjames.com. And that's LindyJames. And also my website, lindyjames.com. You can see what I'm up to. But I do, on Zoom, I'm doing an introductory course, 2 hours. That's free the first Friday of every month. And for those who I live in Santa Cruz, California. For those who live within driving distance, once you have had enough training, I also do an in-person, vaccinated and tested, the best that we can do, where we get to practice the Tantra practices that they've learned. So it's less teaching, it's more practice. And I screen people that they must have had some experience, especially around boundaries and finding their voice and being able to say, slow down or stop, or I need to take a break. I feel overwhelmed. I feel super excited, all of that. And then I have workshops that I offer where you get trained in some of the healing practices that Tantra offers. And I want to mention that once, way back when we started learning about Tantra, it was the only kind of Tantra I ever heard of. And then later I was in relationship with a Buddhist, and he was like, there's lots of other Tantras that have nothing to do with sexuality. So Tantra really means practice. And the tantras that we learned and use are adapted to the Western mind and society. So it could be Western Tantra or Neo-Tantra is the more honest way. I just don't always say those precursors to the word, but it is a practice that is for our benefit to learn more about relationship and about honesty and finding our voice and creating love. And in these, what we call pujas, which are a kind of ritual, and there's lots of pujas too, especially in the Buddhist world, they call all their practices tantras. And so in our world, the puja is a ritual practice, clothing on most of the time. In my trainings, it's always clothing on, and very simple ways that we can practice eye gazing and breathing together, connecting with our hearts, connecting with our personal energy and then the energy of another. And it's really surprising. A friend of mine says, you're sitting across from each other, not quite touching, and where the petals of your heart meet in between. Doesn't that sound just lovely?
I love that. That's real.
So I just, and I see people individually, either on Zoom or in person or couples. And I love working with couples. I find it so fun. And I know you work with couples too.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to pause for a second and go back to this idea of, when we all started using Zoom, I think there was a lot of concern about like, oh my gosh, it's we're not going to be able to do what we do. And what I don't know if this is true for you, but I found that there is a particular type of attention and attunement that we can practice over Zoom that is actually, it's almost more intimate than being in person. Like, I don't know if I hadn't really talked much about this with people, but there's just sort of this feeling, I think, in part because we're invited into people's homes, if you will. And there's just a way of being with people on Zoom that is, I find it to be, to have a quality of connection that I didn't expect. And I'm curious if there's anything there for you.
That's what I was really surprised about too. And even my students, first time ever hearing about Tantra. And we do these things called breakout rooms. And I will breathe 3 deep breaths together and hand on heart and one hand towards the camera. And they could feel each other. And while I'm teaching people to do that, I see, 20, 30, 40 people on my screen and they do it with me. I can feel them. It causes me to laugh. Mm-hmm. I get that bubbly feeling in my heart. We can actually feel each other, not in the sense of touch feeling, but I feel something happens in my heart. Something happens in my energy that I feel the other person. And it's something about the honesty and the intention and the focus that happens in those Zoom practices.
Love that. Well, this has been a rich conversation and we've covered so many different things, but I'm curious if there's just one thing that you want to make sure that people walk away understanding, what might that be?
The practice of embodiment, the practice, like I said, those neural pathways all the way down into the body helps us to feel. And one of the terms we would say is make love all the time. The feeling of making love with a sunset, the joy that the sunset brings, or right now, all the spring flowers. To be able to breathe slow, 3 deep breaths and feel what happens, like that whole sacred tremor in the body. So it can be cooking, it could be in a conversation, it could be, at a sunset or walking in the forest. and in relationship and sexuality. So Tantra is so much more than just better sex. That's one of the lovely side effects, but it's about complete presence in your body. And that can lead to, for those who don't have orgasms or those who have shut down in their body, it can lead us to the path that we need to opening up to more love, to more juiciness, to more spark in our life. Even as I'm saying it, I'm like feeling this aliveness as I'm gesturing with my hands. You can't see me, but it's just such a lovely place. And I want to add that I do an embodiment practice, a half hour, once Monday through Friday on Zoom with no camera at 8 to 8:30. And this is where I really teach this and give practices to help us be all that we can be. And I also record it. So if someone's not in the time zone or has to go to work by 8, they can listen to it on their own. But any kind of practices that you can find that help you keep those neural pathways going all the way down to your big toe. Excellent, excellent start.
Wow. Thank you so much, Lindy.
You're welcome.
So to find out more about Lindy James, please go to the show notes. We will have links to her Eventbrite, her mailing list, her website, and so you can find out more about her. She's super accessible, and really just I'm so pleased that you're here, and somebody that I love to send beginners to. So again, thank you so much, Lindy. And
thank you so much, Deborah. I was going to call you Kat. Deborah.
Deborah Kat. And thank you all for listening. This has been, this is Deborah Kat and my incredible guest, Tantra teacher, Lindy James. And this is the Better Sex podcast. And hopefully you'll try some of the things that we talked about here so that you too can have better sex. Again, please like, subscribe, and comment wherever you listen to podcasts. And have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day.